I had the worst first 24 hours in Hong Kong that anybody could possibly have. And it ended up being my favorite country I had ever lived in.
Lea is the co-founder and CMO of POHA House, and she shares how childhood dreams turned into a mission to redefine living and working spaces.
Our mission is providing a home to people from all over the world and making sure they feel at home in Germany, which is in many cases a foreign country to them.
In this episode, Lea opens up about the challenges of building a startup from scratch and staying true to her vision while navigating uncertainty.
Something I've learned a lot over the years is the value of focus. We cannot do everything, we should just do one thing really, really well.
Join our conversation as Lea inspires us to dream big, take bold steps, and build a more connected, sustainable future.
If you want to do something new, no matter if it's small or big, do it today, because if you do it later, you'll regret waiting.
So, Lea, I saw you've lived in different countries. LinkedIn said 6 countries across 4 continents. And I wanted to ask you how this experience shaped your worldview and inspired your work, the work you're doing right now.
Yeah, honestly, it's something that was always super important to me. There's a funny story that one of my friends told me later, that apparently when I was 10 years old, I told her I wouldn't be graduating high school with her because I would already be living abroad. And I said that when I was 10 years old. So I think from a young age, I always had like a mission to not just travel, but really experience different countries. And I'm really grateful that I had an opportunity, or still have an opportunity, to do that. And honestly, yeah, I think it's just made me more open-minded to different cultures, which has helped me a lot now building POHA House. You know, we have customers from literally all over the world. We have people from 50 different nations now, approximately. And, you know, cultures are different, right? We can pretend that we're all the same, but they are different. And it's hard to sometimes accept different cultures when we don't know about them. And I truthfully, honestly feel that the better we understand where somebody's from and the context, the more we can kind of acknowledge what we have in common and come together as a community.
Yeah, probably also a lot about openness and creating this openness and experiencing this openness for yourself when you're living abroad, because you can kind of try to imagine what it's like, but living there, seeing the culture, meeting the people, it's way different than just, you know, experiencing it in your head. Yeah. So
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we'll talk about more what POHA House does later on, but I mean, part of our mission is providing a home to people from all over the world, right? And making sure they feel at home in Germany, which is in many cases a foreign country to them. And I think just being open-minded to them, from no matter where they come from, no matter if they speak German or not, that's just so valuable. And it's something that these people often don't experience, right? They have to speak to a lot of people in German, even though it's not their native language. You know, they have questions that people here may not understand, but maybe normal questions to them. And they may not understand the process of how to rent a flat or how, you know, basic life works in Germany. And that's completely normal, right? And it's important that we welcome those people in our country, and yeah, that they're able to settle in and that they're happy here.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So if you had to summarize your younger years abroad in some milestones, let's say, what would be the most influential milestones you experienced?
Ooh, milestones. I think I did feel that the more different the country was that I moved to from, let's say Germany, where I'm from, the bigger the challenge, but also how the more rewarding it was afterwards. So I think I first moved to Canada, you know, and when I was 15 years old, and that was of course a big step for me because I was so young, but culturally the country wasn't so different. Um, I think it then became a bigger challenge when I moved to Italy. I think that was a really challenging place for me to move to.
In what
Even though I had
sense?
a great experience, uh, because of the culture difference. I really
Hmm.
felt it in Italy, interestingly, much more than in Canada. Um, and then I think later on I moved to Hong Kong, and that was probably in the end the most rewarding experience, but in the beginning the biggest struggle because I didn't move to the expat area. I moved to a super local area, right? So it was only foreigners there. I was not prepared at all. I had done zero research on the country. I didn't know anything. I literally just flew there. Um, and I think the first 24 hours, I was completely shocked. I was questioning all of my life choices. And yeah, really kind of struggling to fit in. But at the end of the day, I acknowledged, hey, you're here now. You have to make the best of the situation. And it ended up being, my favorite country I had ever lived in. Um, so yeah, I guess like the bigger the leap, the bigger the reward sometimes. So now I'm just super open to kind of any type of country really because I see it as an adventure.
Yeah. So, for how long did you stay in Hong Kong?
I was there for a year and a half.
Studying, or what did you do in Hong Kong?
I first studied there. I did my master's, and then I actually founded POHA House from there. So I started working
Oh,
from there, but on my own company, and that's um, yeah, kind of how it all started. And I had, the worst first 24 hours in Hong Kong that anybody could possibly have, including like losing my wallet,
oh.
having the worst air pollution day, and I was completely worried that was the standard air quality, but it was just an exceptionally bad day on the first day. And thinking that I accidentally signed up to a university program that was in Mandarin instead of in English because I went to the onboarding events and it was fully in Mandarin. And I was like, oh, did I sign up for the wrong program? Which I thankfully did not. But those are my. And then I met a friend, my one foreign friend I met there who said, yeah, she doesn't like Hong Kong at all and she wants to leave.
And you're like, oh no.
It's like, oh,
What have
this
I
is
done?
great. This is a great start.
So now do you speak Mandarin?
I speak a little, but not very much because, of course, in Hong Kong, Mandarin is also not very appreciated,
Hmm.
um, as of now, or yeah, used to be.
So you said you started POHA House from there. What sparked the idea?
Yeah, it's a funny story as well. Well, we had officially founded POHA House actually on Christmas Day in 2018. And the idea wasn't mine, it was my brother-in-law, who had kind of played around with the idea of co-living. He's from the real estate industry and eventually decided he wants to kind of professionally build this company. And we thought, why not do it as a family? Because a lot of the families in real estate, and we kind of were like, you know what, let's just go to a notary, create this company. We're all sitting there at Christmas. But I think what a lot of founders will know that there's a very big step from sitting at the notary and actually creating a company to dedicating your life to it, right? Or working full
Hmm.
time in that company. That may sound intuitive, but that is still a very, very big step. So we were very far away from, or I was very far away from then actually saying, oh, that's my job now. So that was Christmas 2018. Then I was still living in Hong Kong at the time. And then shortly after, 2 months later in February, I met my now husband in Hong Kong. Um, and he had just moved there. He's an expat. So he told me, you know, hey, like, let's, come together, but it only really makes sense if you're staying in Hong Kong because this is where I live. And I was like, it's true. I may have to kind of change my future plans because I was actually about to leave Hong Kong because my studies had ended. And so I was at a really tough spot in the moment because I was basically questioning, do I, you know, take a leap, go for an adventure, stay in Hong Kong for a person I just met? Or do I go back to Europe where I can have, a stable career? Um, and I started applying for jobs in Hong Kong just to see what I could get. And, honestly, it was very disappointing. I did get some job offers, but they were not well paid and not very exciting. There's nothing super thrilling about it. And so that made the two choices even worse, take a shitty job for a person I just met, or go back to Europe and probably have a good job. Um, and that frustration of like, oh, these are both options that I both don't like, and having to make a tough decision. I think that's what ultimately let me to make the best possible decision I could have ever made professionally in my life, was to say no. If I already have two shitty choices, let's just make the best out of a bad situation and go full time to dedicating POHA House. And that was actually the idea of my brother-in-law. And I thought it was crazy at the time, but it was the perfect move. And that's exactly what sparked me to say, hey, I'm gonna now work full time on my own startup. And well, it was a good decision because yeah, 6 years later, I'm still here.
So at that point, how far along was the idea?
I mean, you just said it. It was an idea,
Yeah.
and I think I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a very risk-loving person, and I'm not. There's people who are like, oh, natural kind of startup founders, right? They're jumping from kind of one idea to the next. That wasn't me. I very much wanted, a linear kind of career growth with constant salary increases and title improvements and, um, not the kind of, oh, I go back to now zero income and working on an idea that may or may not work out. So it was definitely, risky and unusual for me. And that's why I always tell the background story of meeting my husband, etc., because I know 100% for myself that I wouldn't be here today if, life hadn't taken that course 6 years ago. And I wish I could say differently. I wish I could say, I just really believed in this idea and I was super brave and I went for it. But I think the reality is that often the best ideas and, the best startups and businesses come out of these weird kind of frustrating coincidences, right? Like how many people founded a business during COVID because they were so frustrated. They were like, fuck it all, let's just try something new. Um, and it's a shame that it requires these moments, to inspire us, but that's often the case, right? And
Hmm.
um, I think we need to kind of, yeah, try to be more brave, right?
Yeah.
Try things out no matter what happens.
I mean, sometimes we are comfortably numb, you know? The pain is not big enough to change or to do something. We feel really secure in our comfort zone or a job or whatever it is. And sometimes something big needs to happen, some change, some
Mm,
pain somewhere, and doesn't only it's not only it's not only about entrepreneurship or founding a business or something else. I mean, it's also
100%.
about changing something in a toxic relationship or whatever it is, a lot of things. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I
Getting
totally
out of a
get it.
relationship, starting a new hobby, moving to a new country, starting a new job, founding a business. It's all about taking the leap, right? And the reality is
Hmm.
that we know we want it, but either we will never do it or we will take too long to do it. Um, and that time we took to basically convince ourselves that that's the right decision is a time we will later on think, oh, I wish I had done it sooner. And I
Yeah.
think everybody will say that. And even for me, right, I waited 8 months from August 2019 when I actually joined POHA full time. Um, so from I guess sorry from December 2024 to August. No, sorry, from December to August, so 8 months to actually join the business, right? And it's something, and I always said this later on. I wish I had done it sooner, and I wouldn't have wasted these 8 months. So,
Hmm.
um, I think a lot of people say that.
I feel like sometimes it's about taking the perspective of how would I look back at my life and about how would I look at the choices I've made. And also the podcast I started, I
Mm-hmm.
was a little scared, because I'm not the person who is the center of the party or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I said to myself, why not? Why wait for this one thing to happen and then I can try it or whatever it is. So just do it, see how it goes, how it feels, and you can always make another decision and change something about it. So I feel like that's a mindset or whatever you want to call it that's really helping us embrace growth in some sense.
Yeah, good for you. Very inspirational.
So I want to get back to POHA House. What were
Mm-hmm.
some of the biggest challenges you faced in bringing the concept eventually to life in the beginning?
Who? Um, so many things. I mean, I think it's been, it's been a journey. uh, And the crazy thing is that the challenge really changes every year. It's like a completely different challenge. It was just my co-founder and me. We started the two of us. We had a meeting every day, and then the rest of the day I was just working, trying to
Hmm.
type up some strategies, some processes. I had no clue about the industry. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I was just, going with the flow. The next challenge was growing the team, hiring people based on an idea that didn't really exist in reality yet. That was tough for us. We made our first hires in 2020. Um, and we opened our first house in 2022. So that means, we hired people 2 years before we actually had a real product. And that's something, employees, team members identify with your product, right? Much more than they identify with an idea. So we lost some people in the beginning because they were like, hey, I don't have the patience anymore. I don't think I can be part of this if there's nothing, real to show. I can't keep talking about a fictional idea,
Hmm.
which is totally understandable. So that was tough. Um, Later on, challenge was, building the right culture, making sure there's not a lot of turnover, making sure we're all kind of fighting for the same vision. That was tough, and I think it took some time to really understand who the right fit is. We've gotten really good at that now. Um, yeah, and now it's a whole different ballpark. We're 30 people now, we have 4 sites open. It sounds like a dream, and I'm super excited about it. But then, you're so in the day-to-day hustle that now it's about, optimizing processes and basically fixing all the decisions you made, the wrong decisions you made 5 years ago. Maybe changing technologies, changing products, kind of really, improving the whole product. Um, and yeah, managing a team, of that size comes with its own challenges. So I think the most challenging thing for me, in a nutshell, is adapting to the new challenge that comes, right?
Hmm.
And kind of having to grow so quickly because the challenges of your company grow so quickly, and you as a person have to be part of that growth. You cannot stand still. I have to go from being a junior employee myself to being a team lead to being a C-level who manages team leads, right? And I have to do that all at a speed that is much faster than anyone would normally do it in a normal career progression. Um, so yeah, constantly finding yourself again and doing the right thing for the company. I think that's always the toughest challenge.
Yeah. Um, I'm wondering when you first start, there's this idea, this vision of where you want to go. And then, let's say 6 years, 5 years down the road, how did it change? And did it change?
Um, hmm. I think, mm, I think it's changed a lot less than people would probably expect. I would, I wouldn't say that's necessarily normal. I think we've stayed quite true to our vision. Um, we had the vision to develop co-spaces. So they're essentially buildings where people can live, work, and come together under one roof. Um, and surprisingly, we're still very true to that mission now, so it hasn't actually changed that much. Um, but we are, of course, also seeing challenges to the product. I think one of our USPs is that we are creating this kind of ecosystem, this world, all in one building, which is amazing. But of course, we're also realizing kind of the operational challenges of that, um, because it's quite complex to manage all these different products in one building. Um, and having a technology set up that is really suitable to such an innovative product.
Hmm.
And I think something I've learned a lot over the years is the value of focus. And I think this is something I preach a lot now with my team, is that we cannot do everything. We should just do one thing really, really well. So with the brand we have, it's really easy for us to kind of drift off in random directions. But that can cost a lot of, time and energy. And so one of my main, things I really promote now is to kind of really stay on one path, have one clear vision, but do that super well, and then focus on growing.
Was there one specific moment that really tested your vision or your leadership? And if so, how did you overcome it, or how do you overcome these moments?
A moment that tested my leadership.
I mean, or the vision or the belief in the vision.
I think leadership is tough. It's always been tough for me as well. I think managing a team in general, especially such a large team, um, does come with its challenges, and I wouldn't say that that is the part that is probably most easy for me. So I would say that's the part where I've had to grow most as a person. Um, and there are moments I still struggle with it today, having difficult conversations with team members is super tough, especially when you have such a close personal bond to them. Um, and then making sure, especially in a company, it's still so young and is still changing so much, making sure you're all running in the same direction, right? You're aligned, and there's not like separate visions of the company uh coming up, but really taking the time to actually, yeah, align on what we want to do and doing it together. um that's hard, I would say. So this has been so I would say the leadership aspects to it, and really bringing the team together and having one clear vision as a leadership team. This has for us been probably, at least for me personally, been the biggest challenge. And but it's part of the journey again, like I said, right?
Hmm.
Um, so that's just kind of the step we're at now.
I'm thinking about this. I mean, you're probably taking on different roles, and in one situation you are the boss in some scenario, and in the other situation you're the coworker who's listening to other problems as well. And you said you're really close. And how I see the your brand on social media, for example, it looks like a really mm, kind of like a family based
Mhm.
being together. I mean, this accommodates as well the vision you have with POHA House in general. How do you separate these roles, or do you even have to separate them? I mean, I feel like this is the challenge of being someone who's in a leadership role.
Yeah, truthfully, I think you can't really separate them, unfortunately. Um, I wish that I could, have dinner with my colleagues and be one person, and then the next day at a meeting, I'm the other. Um, but I think it
Bipolar.
doesn't work that way, and I think that's also normal. Um, but yeah, I think, I think it's tough because you it's your own business, right? So you have goals and you have aspirations, and you know exactly what you want to achieve and when you want to achieve it. And that makes you tough, naturally. And people will love that about you professionally. Um, but personally, on a personal level, you will always be the founder of the business. You will always be someone's manager. And you can break those barriers down a lot, but never fully. And I think some people will probably say, oh, it's all about the relationship you build with your colleagues and stuff, and it's all about you. But I think ultimately, as a founder, you have to accept that you will never be treated as a coworker. And I also think that's okay as long as it's acknowledged. Of course, does that make your daily life a little bit lonelier? Are you going to find your best friend in your colleague? Probably not. Um, and maybe that's okay, and maybe it's better to find your community among other founders, among other friends, among your family, whatever it may be. It just may not be at work, not to that fully personal extent, and it doesn't mean that you can't still be really close with your colleagues. And that's okay, and for me that's just become something i've I've accepted, and it's become totally normal to me. um because I think it's just how it works.
Yeah. To come back a little bit to the concept of
Mhm.
co-living, do you think that traditional housing and workspaces are becoming obsolete?
No, I think it's all a question of definition. I think let's talk about housing first. Um, I think the way we live is evolving and should 100% evolve because our lives are evolving, right? Our lives are becoming more digital, more flexible, more spontaneous. We have higher expectations in the service we want to receive. And our housing hasn't changed at all in the last 100 years. So if we think about it completely logically, rationally, housing should evolve. Um, that does not mean that the housing we know today shouldn't exist in the next 100 years. It should just um, be, I guess, one piece of a bigger portfolio. So to give you a concrete example, I think um, the way we know housing right now and also the way we define it is to be very inflexible, without services, very kind of rigid. Um, if I rent two rooms now and then I need a third, I cannot just get that third room. I probably need to, move out entirely, find a new flat. So I think where housing, should change is to just adapt to our modern lifestyles, right? So if I want furnished housing, I should be able to get that, or I should be able to add or reduce furniture depending on my need. I should be able to add services depending on my need. Do I want to have Wi-Fi included? Do I not want it included, right? Do I want an extra room? Do I not want an extra room? So I think it just needs to become a lot more flexible. Do I want flexible lease terms? Or would I rather save money for inflexible lease terms, right? So
Hmm.
all these different, I call them options, right? I just want to have more options in the housing market. Right now, it's just very, very, very restricted. And POA House is basically on the extreme other end of traditional housing, where everything's included. We offer furniture included. We have different types of housing. Um, electricity, Wi-Fi, all utilities are included. There's community spaces. And that's one extreme. And of course, not all housing will be POA houses, but a lot of housing could be somewhere between a POA house and a traditional flat. So maybe, maybe it's an unfurnished flat, but there are still community spaces. Maybe there are shared rooms for kids to play at. Maybe there are shared babysitting services. Maybe there's shared e-bikes, right? There's a huge spectrum between offering a fully serviced home like POA House is and a completely non-frills traditional house like we have right now. And I think we need operators to fill in all these spaces along the spectrum so that
Hmm.
really everybody can find the perfect home for themselves.
Yeah, which also means there's not one solution for, I mean, we are all so different. People are looking for different kinds of ways of living.
Yeah,
And
everyone's different. It's not like the phone market, where everybody, half the population ends up with an iPhone. I think this is very different.
yeah.
And actually, it's like you're saying, we're actually becoming more individualistic, right? As a society, we our needs are becoming more unique. So
Hmm.
that's why it's important to also offer housing options that are more and more unique to different kind of niche target audiences.
That's what I find interesting. You said we're becoming more individualized. I'm
Hmm.
not I'm not certain this is like always good, you know? If you
Right.
look back at how we used to live, for example, we used to live more in communities, living with your
Mhm.
parents, for example, your grandparents. Everyone is supporting each other in different phases of their life. What I'm wondering, and maybe in your experience, you lived in Italy, and I feel like when I talk to friends from Italy, it's the family, the community living is it's way it's different than in Germany. It's way closer
Mhm.
and living together. What was your experience like in that sense? And also to build the bridge to your concept and POHA House, do you think this concept is, you said in Germany, it's kind of missing this part, but I feel like maybe in Italy, this missing part is not as big. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think you're right. I think different cultures, we know this, for example, from India, from Italy, there's a lot more sense of family and community, and there's other cultures that are already naturally much more isolated. But I think overall, we're seeing this in the Western world as a general trend across all countries that people are becoming more individualistic, they're becoming more separated, we're becoming more isolated, we're becoming more lonely, right? Um, there's less available places for community because where do we find community, right? We don't find it in religion anymore, we don't find it at our office. We go to the gym less, we don't go to the library. There are less kind of physical places for people to connect. um, and so, we're left kind of with these isolated communities. And that's a shame in a lot of ways because, first of all, everybody needs community. Everybody, needs friendships. They need people to meet in real life. Parents need support, right, with kids. They're often left on their own. Older generation, senior citizens need other people to connect with in their own age, but also in other ages. Maybe they need support, right, to do shopping or to do basic things. So essentially, we all really, really crave this community, but we see all the trends clearly moving away from that.
Hmm.
And so I think that's also a big challenge that housing needs to solve, right? Stop separating people, but how to bring people together again.
Hmm. When we spin this a little further, like
Mm-hmm.
living and working in one space can also sometimes kind of blur the lines between work and private life. What do
Right.
you think this is going to develop into, and how does the ideal future look like to not have like this mix of everything in one place? Especially like also, I'm thinking you're a mother, for example.
Yeah.
There's time for being a mother, there's time for being a leader, or in your professional work. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think for better or for worse, they are already blending together, right? With the home disappearing as a home place and the office disappearing as a physical place, I think, and us just realizing that ultimately many of us, not everybody, many of us can work from anywhere. Um, I think they are already kind of blending and becoming one world. All we're doing at POHA House is kind of, making that trend that is already happening and is already desired more accessible. Um, and I don't think it's a bad thing, necessarily. I think ultimately we can design our own lives, and that gives us the freedom to choose how and where we want to work, and that's ultimately up to us. But the point is that we have the choice.
Hmm. Do you have thoughts on work-life balance? This is kind of influential term because if you're a founder, and I guess this idea is always on your mind, how do you go about that, about the balance?
I find that word really tricky. I don't think I really believe in work-life balance. I think what's important is preserving one's mental health, and
Hmm.
everyone should do what they need to do in order to do that. And um, I think I've had moments in the past when this has been tough for me. I've also had moments not long ago where I was on call 24/7 and you could reach me any day of the week, anytime for any issue. Um, and thankfully that's no longer the case because that was hard for me and that was definitely I was reaching my limits. I did it for a long time, but the more time passed, the more I realized I couldn't keep going with it.
Hmm.
Um, um, but I think it's so different for everyone. I think everyone has different needs of how they recover and how much they need to recover. Um, and sometimes, working can also be relaxing. It's so I don't think the solution is separating it from personal life. It's about, finding time to recover and yeah, doing what works best for you.
And also, I think, in my opinion, it's also about what you're doing, and if you're feeling some kind of passion for what you're doing, or you have some kind of mission that you're inspired by, because then it's more about living life in all aspects and not really differentiating between this is my private life and this is work. Because what does that
Mm.
imply? It implies that you have to separate it, and there's this line, and or this is now work mode and this is now private mode. And I feel like life is way too precious to have to separate it. It's like life in all aspects.
And you know what
And
else it implies? It implies that your work is so bad that you need this whole time zone where you're not doing it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I always say this to people who feel like they 100% need to shut off of work, or they have like Sunday night depressions because Monday's around the corner. I'm like, well, then your job is
Well,
probably not that fun.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm very grateful that I don't feel that at all. And usually I don't work on the weekends because, my daughter keeps me very busy. But if I do work on the weekends, it's not because I have to, but because I want to, and I enjoy it.
What would be your advice for people to find their own passion or mission or work they love?
Good question. Question is, I think most people probably know what they are passionate about. Um, they just may be too afraid to try
Scary thought.
it. So, yeah, maybe kind of follow that inner voice. Yeah, maybe they may not acknowledge that they know what they want to do, but they probably do know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about it myself because I mean, passion always, it's also about trying something and you can develop a passion for something you're trying, I guess. And but
Mm,
being courageous enough to try something, to even give yourself the chance to develop some kind of passion for it and then see where it leads you. But I
mm,
think people are often scared because it seems like a bigger risk sometimes to doing something you love because you associate it with maybe something you're not going to be able to, I don't know, whatever, earn money or have
mm,
your security or whatever it is. But I feel like if you're brave enough to pursue this path, you're going to become good at something because you love it. And eventually the reward, and maybe the money doesn't matter at that point anymore, but the reward is somehow coming. And that can be in form of like money, or it can be in, doing something good. You're feeling some sense of worth or whatever it is for you.
And whenever I'm facing a tough choice between two or more options, something I often go back to is first step, remind myself what my values are. That's something I recommend to everyone who hasn't actually explored this. Um, so, for example, some of my values include freedom as a big value for me, and family, um, but also adventure is important to me and success. And so I look at my values and then I look at my two options or three options, right? A, B, C. And then I evaluate with which, or on each choice, where will each value rank highest? So, right, if my choice A is, doing something super adventurous and that'll be great for my adventure value, then I give that, score 5 out of 5 or whatever. And based on that, I can kind of compare different options. It's obviously just one method, but I think sometimes it helps to bring back tough decisions back to basic numbers, I think.
How do you go about decisions in your business life? Because personal life, okay, you have your values and you kind of feel into what does this trigger in myself. But in business, I mean, I guess values are important as well, but you're dealing with a lot of people, you're dealing with other consequences. How do you go about tough decisions?
Good question because I have a lot of them. Um, and of course, not everything can be quantified, not everything should be quantified, but sometimes it does help to reduce things back to numbers. I always compare what I have today as a benchmark to all the other options I'm deciding. So it's always the status quo versus option A, option B, option C. I usually make a list of all the reasons why this is important, all the features, all the topics. And then I rank my status quo compared to all my other options on all of these features or elements. And ultimately, it gives me a score. That may not give me the whole picture, but it will ensure that my emotions will not get ahead of me, and that I will ultimately make a rational decision that is not impulsive or just purely emotionally driven.
Okay. So, looking back at your journey, has your definition of success changed, and how has it changed or evolved?
Hmm. Um, I think we often associate success with money or power or a title. Um, I think when I was younger, that's what I mentioned. That's how usually I define success, and it was important for me that success was linear. It didn't go up or down. It just went up. Even if it didn't go up super quickly, as long as there was an upwards trend, it was fine. Um, and now I've learned sometimes to go up, you have to go down first. Um, and sometimes to make more money, you have to make less money first. Um, but I think the biggest learning is that probably the best feeling of success isn't any of those things. It's having a positive impact, having an impact on your team, on your customers, on the environment, on society, doing something that lasts. I think that's the biggest feeling of success.
I agree. Sounds good. So, if you could leave the people who are listening with one key message, what would that be?
I think we already have it, right? If you want to do something new, no matter if it's small or big, do it today because if you do it later, you'll regret waiting
Or not doing it?
or not doing it.
Sounds good. I'll take that away from the podcast. I have one last question for you. This
Mm-hmm.
is regarding my podcast. It's called my podcast is called Bridging Worlds, and I want to know, what does bridging worlds mean to you, and how do you see that reflecting in your life and your work?
I think coming together as a community, no matter where we're from, which language we speak, which, religion we have, or which sexuality we have, um, coming together, uh, finding our commonalities among all the differences, and building communities of where we're tolerant to each other. And I think especially in these kind of scary times, it's really important.
All right. Thank you, Lea. If people want to stay up to date with what you're doing, with new projects, new POHA House location openings, where should they go?
Yeah, so definitely check out our website, pohouse.com, or they can follow us on Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn at POHA House. Um, and yeah, we offer housing options in Aachen and Münster right now. So if anybody's looking for a really cool flat and community to join, then they can also go there.
Perfect. Lea, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.